So this is my wife and I in 2008 on our honeymoon safari, luxury camping honeymoon to Botswana. Now, when I imagine luxury camping, I was thinking about this big California king, right? And it turned out to be two army cots side by side. I kid you not. And when I imagine luxury, I imagine at least a flushing toilet. But really, we were delivered squatty potties on top of a hole. I kid you not. And needless to say, this was not an action adventure. Plenty of adventure, very little action on the honeymoon, unfortunately. But here we are in Botswana. My mom's in the room. I can't go any deeper than that. Here we are in Botswana, and this is a place called Savuti. It's about 8 hours east of anything remotely civilized within a country like Botswana in the middle of Africa. And we were in Savuti. And what we recognized was that as you get into Botswana, you realize the guides have no guns. They don't advertise this when you book the adventure, right? But they have no guns to protect you. They only have their hands and maybe some knives or something like that. And so at some point, my mind was thinking like, wow, there has to be some sort of interaction between humans and these animals because they're in their very natural state. And you're out there in the middle of nowhere. And so after much chiding with our guide, I said, has there ever been something, has there ever been an accident? He broke down over a couple glasses of wine and dinner, and he shared with us a story. In this very spot a year earlier, a family had come to do a safari. 3 boys, they all wanted to see hyenas. They stayed up late, no hyenas came. So they went to bed that night, and unfortunately, one of the boys decided he was going to stay up a little bit later. He unzipped his tent, he fell asleep, and well, it made headline news. Hyenas ended up coming. And it was a tragic story. And at that point, my wife looked at me and she said, "You asshole." I'm the size of an 11-year-old boy, and marched off to her cot. And I kid you not, at about 2 in the morning, we heard footsteps. And it got heavier and heavier and bigger, and it rolled right up alongside of our tent, whatever it was. And at that point in time, my heart was in my throat. I could barely breathe. I reached down for this like little 2-inch army knife that I had, and I leaned up to see what it was, and it was a gigantic hyena, about 12 inches from my face with only nothing but a mesh tent in between us, lapping water out of our water basin. And I reacted, right? I reacted. In the deepest, most Neanderthalic voice I could come up with, I screamed, "Yeah!" And the thing went running off. The guide came over, and he said, "What happened?" And I said, "A gigantic hyena was lapping water out of the water basin." And he looked at me and he said, "Don't ever do that again. A lion is most likely tracking it." And he walked off. I kid you not. So at that very moment, it was quite an experience, right? That's the adventure part of it. But you realize in these competitive, high-stakes, high-pressure environments, whether it be the animal kingdom, right? That is the ultimate competition, survival, or whether it be B2B and B2B tech marketing, right? We often react out of fear. We think and act in the short term, right? We take the most direct path to proving short-term indicators. And I get it. We're in roles where there's venture capital, there's money, everyone wants acceleration and scale. We have to hit our targets, right? There's tremendous pressure on us. We've lived in this world for over a decade and a half. I completely get it. I feel for you. We feel with you as an agency. But I would humbly suggest that survival demands a proactive approach to thinking and acting, where we're aligning ourselves to the greatest possible outcome. And that takes risks, and that takes putting ourselves in an uncomfortable position. But I'm going to suggest throughout this that if you think about it, ultimately it means doing less better. So real quick on myself, CEO of BusinessOnline, talked to a lot of fantastic folks to get their perspective on what's happening in B2B and tech. 16 years in digital marketing. We have fantastic clients, and that's enough about myself. We are also working with LinkedIn to produce a long-form version of this content. So we're using their best and brightest, we're using their clients, their point of view and their research to collaborate on what are the best and brightest doing in B2B tech to driving outcomes that they seek. And unfortunately, Kelly wasn't able to be here today, but you'll see this come out in a couple of weeks from both of us. So the agenda for today is, number one, talking about why. Why has data-driven or digital marketing become so important to businesses today. And I think if we uncover the framework for thinking about this, we can solve the problem better, right? And then we'll talk about the big stuff, the little secrets of big data. We'll talk about meaningful measurements and insights. We'll talk about moving from channel to customer focus. And then we'll talk about fraud and deception, which I think isn't talked about enough in the world we live in. So why data-driven marketing? Why now? I believe it's because of the pace of change, right? No matter how big your company, how small, what industry you're in, what vertical, whether you market to male or female, it doesn't matter. The pace of change, political, geo, the Brexit for Christ, I mean, it's everywhere, right? There's so much change. And Chambers said it well. The speed of change is twice as fast as it was just 3 years ago. Companies have to change to adjust to change the markets. Of the Fortune 500 companies 25 years ago, only 24% are still in business. Wow. That hurts. Only a third of us will be in existence in a meaningful way. And what was it, almost $26 billion exchanged hands over a 6-month period in Madison Avenue a few months back? I mean, that's tremendous change in such a short period of time. And because of this, I believe the enterprise value paradigm has changed. I say the word paradigm, it makes me feel smart. Let me have it. Where the greatest company asset is the customer relationship. That is the biggest asset within any organization. And if you think about it, it's more important than product. Ask Blockbuster about Netflix. It's more important than IP. Ask Apple about Samsung. It's more important than brand. And I know how important brand is in marketing. I get it. Ask Google about Facebook, both of them about Amazon. Lots of competition happening fast. And I think Forrester says it well. Maybe even Laura, this is your quote. I'll give you credit for this if you're out there. It's the age of the customer. Empowered buyers, disruptive digital innovators erase traditional competitive advantages. The next wave will come from deep customer knowledge, engagement tied to the buyer's timing, and I love this part, and actions based on an obsessive, I'm sweating right now, I can be quite obsessive. Kahlows can be obsessive, let's be clear. Desire to deliver what your customers want before your competition does. I think that summarizes it well. And allow me to digress just slightly further, and I'll bring it back to reality. Take a company like GM, largest market cap in 1999, over a century in business. What happened 10 years later? Bankrupt. That's crazy. Facebook, 8 years in business, $80 billion market cap. It's amazing, right? And IBM did this study of the 1,500 most important or successful CEOs, and they all said they lived in this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And almost 80% of them said their number one macro objective was to get closer to their customer. Most of them said through the lens of data. CMOs felt the same, but according to Christine and others, they felt this impending pressure to deliver for every dollar that went into the marketing machine, what 14 come out in return. Marketing return on investment is a big topic these days. So simplify this, bring it all together. Why data-driven marketing? Why now? And I believe it's because of this. Customers have control, and the fundamentals have changed. The barriers to entry are minimal. Your competition can and will enter and win quickly. I don't care how big you are. We know this, right? The customer relationship is most important and most valuable. And last but not least, data is the introduction and enabler and insights into those very relationships. And this is good for us. This is fantastic for us. There's never been a better time to be in marketing, specifically in B2B. And I hopefully will bring that case to light in a moment here. Big data. Big hype. There's a lot of talk about big data, and I get it. There is just driving tremendous value in the marketing food chain, if you will. And if you think about it, it's this race. It's highly competitive, right? How do we leverage big data and the technologies that can glue and connect these pieces together to deliver meaningful business outcomes? And the focus tends to be on the engine, right? On the actual technology or the data itself. And I get that. It makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of money in it, right? But I think we often forget about the operators, the people and the process that make it and bring that value and that promise to fruition. It's often skipped. It's all about the technology. No, there are real good folks in a process behind this, and let's talk about that. From my perspective, it's people, right? It's data developers, folks who know how to move large structured and unstructured sources of data, ETLs. Right? Business analysts, folks who are good with math and stats that can bring statistically relevant information to the forefront. Pearson correlations, regression analysis. Marketing technologists, they can crack open Salesforce, Marketo, and Google Analytics or Adobe and begin to write custom code and port our data between systems, right? So we can understand the journey from the first ad through purchase. And last but not least, digital marketing experts who understand channel, who understand omni-channel, and who are imaginative and creative in delivering solutions that move the needle, right? Beyond insights to action. And if you move and evolve into process, we often love to focus on step 3, which is the beautiful dashboards and reporting. There's Domo, and there's Adobe, and there's Tableau, right? We love that stuff. It's beautiful, it's bold, it's colorful, right? And we love the notion that insight's being extracted from it. But if we don't do steps 1 and 2, which is the discovery and understanding what our current state is, and then setting up an opportunity to begin to connect that data in a meaningful way, we have nothing. And here's the little secret on predictive. You've got to do those 2 things incredibly well in order to get the results you're looking for. Let's talk about that. From a data diagnostic perspective, number 1, understand the business questions you're looking to answer. Pretty simple, right? Then understanding what your technology looks like. Is it able to answer those questions? Then understanding the data, right? Do you have clean enough data? If not, what does it need to look like to be clean enough to answer those questions? And last but not least is the process with which your company uses those business systems. A simple example like Salesforce. Is the sales team using Salesforce well to answer those questions? You have to have that current state understanding and roadmap to move into the direction to, again, deliver on that promise of scale and efficiency, right? Or even predictive. And if you take one step deeper and you look at the data mining and business process, this is a tool we use called Alteryx. This is some nerdy shit, stuff I'm not smart enough to do. I'll tell you that right now. You extract the data from multiple messy systems and messy forms. You transform it, you cleanse it, you dedupe it, you reshape it. Then you load it, right, through ETLs, right? And you get it ready in a warehouse, relational, non-relational database, and you get it ready for action. But it's not until you go through these steps and go through this pain and this unsexy process, and it's totally unsexy, right? And there's a lot of really smart folks that have to do it in order to bring that promise to bear. And Sixth Sense is a great example of a company doing just that, right? Predictive is not, waving a magic wand. It's understanding these pieces to be able to deliver on that promise. And then if you bring it up to a 30,000-foot view, you can begin to look at your web analytics connected to marketing technology, connected to your media data, storing it in a database, right? Visualizing it through Tableau, and using Amazon Web Services connected through APIs. This is what it could look like from a high-level perspective. And if you don't do this, the unfortunate thing is you end up doing this, which is spending a lot of time on the back end. This is an actual analyst going through the process of munging and crunching data when you haven't delivered the people who understand how to do this and the process to automate this. Tremendous amount of inefficiency, tremendous amount of inaccuracy. This is painful. And I would say of the mid-market enterprise clients we work with, about 80% are doing this, right? It's static, it's ugly, it's inefficient. I see a ton of smiles out there right now. A ton of them. Because we do this. I get it. It sucks. Totally sucks. All right. Now if we understand the people in the process, how do we deliver meaningful measurement and insights, right? And I think right here, right now, on this stage today, we have an opportunity to be these heroes, right? Sales are the rainmakers, right? Engineers are the geniuses behind product development. But we as marketers are the conduit to the most valuable asset within the organization, the customer relationship. It's awesome. It's big. There's a huge opportunity if we can do it well. And delivering on that is understanding, improving the value to the business outcomes we seek. Not the channels, the business outcomes to deliver on that opportunity and get the budget and respect we rightfully deserve. It's our turn. Okay, so how do we do this? We're all looking to produce accurate, timely, meaningful reports, but we're often looking at the wrong stuff, unfortunately. We're often having accuracy or credibility problem because we get poked at all the time. Like, is that number right? Why is that one off? This doesn't seem right. That's not good for us, right? Data connections. How many of these sources are connected together? How granular can you go in terms of the questions you want to answer as you connect that? And last but not least is speed. We need to operate in the digital world, at digital speed, and often we're getting this stuff at the very end of the month, right? And we can't, and it takes so long to crunch and produce a new report. We need to enable ourselves to operate as our customers are operating. And when we do this, we can unlock these meaningful insights and analysis. We can deliver business insights like, what is my marketing return on investment? There's an opportunity to do this. It doesn't happen overnight. It's painful. It takes a long time. But there's a new goal to be set, right? From a marketing perspective, what are the channels? How much should I be spending? What are those channels? And what are effective cost per marketing qualified sales accepted lead? This is when we have a conversation with the CFO, right, where we can talk about meaningful outcomes. And last but not least, from a customer perspective, is understanding what their needs, wants, and desires are throughout this journey, right? And being able to talk about engagement and content that they're consuming in the channels to drive meaningful insights around what their needs are. But yet most of us don't have the talent to do this, or we're not set up to do this. And it's a challenge, right? And here's why. And I think this has been talked about a big part of today. We have a very siloed approach to thinking about this. We bought our technology, our marketing technology stack. We got SEO tools doing SEO. We got paid media tools doing paid media. We've got programmatic tools and programmatic, right? And they do a great job of that. And don't get me wrong, I understand the value in driving success in those in that siloed way. But I believe there's so much greater value if we can look at it in a more horizontal approach, breaking through those silos and looking at it from the very first ad all the way through the purchase. Who are these folks, right? Where are they in the buying journey? And what did they do? And this is what we should be after. This is the bold, brave stuff that we can begin to invent around to drive our businesses forward. We like to look at measurement and a maturity model, and we think there's 5 major components of this. Number 1 is digital indicators. I get it, we need to do it. It's part of our job, potentially connected to our bonus, so we have to show folks we're doing something. But as soon as we can evolve out of that is understanding what influence we're having to the pipeline. And in fact, I think it's time we demand to be in the sales reporting room when folks are reporting numbers and sales opportunities to the executive team. We need to talk about our influence in that because we have a real say in it. We have a real impact. And then delivering cost, understanding technology, agency, and media costs, and weaving those pieces in. And then we move into this notion of attribution. Now it gets a little bit more exciting, a little bit more sexy, where we can begin to demystify who, where, and what, right? And we can understand the omni-channel approach and what's actually driving influence. And last but not least is predictive, right? And for me, predictive addresses this issue of time. And I think we've heard this a couple of times today. It's an amazing opportunity to understand these components rolled up into one, but then address time. Because if we understand when these folks are looking, we have such a greater opportunity to drive efficiency and actually focus and double down on those clients we can actually bring in as prospects into clients on behalf of the business. And it's such an amazing opportunity. And then we can look at these reports, right? The eye candy. But this stuff is, I think, way meaningless. The content dashboards, the landing page dashboard, the product dashboards, keyword dashboards, website dashboards, channel dashboards. I've seen them all. Paid media, roll-up, media. But the question becomes, when is that enough? When are we bold enough to say, let's look at something different? And here's a small example. We can begin to click on an individual opportunity, munging together web analytics with a little bit of media and CRM, and seeing that Ernst & Young has engaged with us a couple hundred times in multiple channels. We understand the opportunity is fairly large, and we can begin to assign influence and focus to our sales team, right? And then after we do this, we can talk about marketing return on investment, right? We can begin to say, look, we helped to generate 120 net new opportunities in the pipeline, sales and marketing. Of that, and this is a real number on behalf of our clients, 56% of those was influenced by marketing. This was the first time they were able to see this. And they went running up to the executive team and say, look, we can finally prove that we're having an impact on the pipeline. And the moment you have that conversation, I think it shifts, right? Because now it's not about an expense, it's about growth. And now it costs $240 per qualified lead, 12 million net new pipeline, and on average, 7 weeks to move from one stage of the funnel to the other. These are the things we should be thinking about. Again, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, people, process, and technology. But it's exciting when we can do it. And then attribution, right? I like to think about it like this. If we're looking at the sales funnel, just use the most traditional model, right? And we're looking at a sales accepted lead at 40. And then we begin to drive into understanding of those 40 opportunities, what did the individuals within those opportunities do, right? And we can understand the channel that they engage with and the assets they consumed and experiences. And then begin to aggregate this over multiple clients and close one and close loss and comparing that over quarter, year in and year out. And then this is where some real magic can happen. And of course, predictive, I'm not going to touch with a 10-foot pole because we've got some folks in here I believe are experts, so I think we'll step beyond that. So we talk about people and process and leveraging big data. We talk about measurement and insights. Now let's talk a little about moving from channel focus in terms of how we think and plan to customer focus. And in our mind's eye, we've all seen this graphic, right? Over $120 billion, according to LinkedIn, will be spent on a yearly basis on marketing technology. That's a big freaking hunkin' number. But where's Waldo in the middle here? What about him, right? And if you ask me, there's 2 components we should be thinking about as we focus on our customer. Number 1 is online is offline and offline is online. I believe digital itself, and we're a digital agency, doesn't exist alone. And number 2 is stop our marketing dictatorship. And as Amanda said, and I love it, Stephen Covey, understand first, then seek to be understood. And think about this very event. A great example of this. We look to drive registration, whether it be desktop or mobile, to the physical event. When we're here in the physical event, we're saying interact with our mobile device and follow us on Twitter, right? It goes both ways. And I would say this. If you can't execute at a customer buying journey level, but you still have to operate in your silos of channels, at least you can plan around that. And let me explain what that can look like. Actually, let me take one step further. If you take that notion of online being offline and offline being online and extend it, I like to say business is digital and digital is business, man. I feel like a rapper when I do that. I don't know. I mean, take a company like Airbnb, not a single bed, right? 20 billion market cap. Uber, not a single cab, 50 billion market cap. Alibaba, 251 billion, they don't produce a single product. And Johnny Walker Black, when you crack that sucker open, there's thin film technology that sends you a text message with a recipe and tells you when it's time to reorder. And for me, with 3 kids under the age of 6, that's every other week. Woo! In the Internet of Things, IoT, the industrial Internet of Things, think about the efficiencies that are driven from beacon technologies, woven into, capital equipment, right? I mean, and then think about the opportunity from a marketing perspective to get our hands on that data. My head explodes. We're just the beginning of big data. If you think in a 6 Sense roadmap, and this is just me riffing for a second, there's got to be something there, right? Like 2 years out, where we're talking about Internet of Things data being woven into predictive analytics, when they're going to reorder. I don't know, but that's exciting. And then second is stop your darn marketing dictatorship, right? When we've studied the customer buying journey, we look at it in 4 phases. And we look at this over the past decade plus. We look at the exploration phase where someone's looking to solve a problem and wants to feel smart. Give them some information to feel good about themselves, right? Build that trust and reciprocity. Then when they're in the, can we go back? Then when they're in the evaluation phase, right, we've earned the right to be considered as one of the vendors to be chosen. We move them to the purchasing phase. We're looking for social proof persuasion to get them over the hump, to reduce that risk. And when they're in the experience phase and they bought from us, we're using those stories to retell throughout the journey, right? But yet, only 8% of us, according to Accenture, are planning this way. I think that smells of huge opportunity. And if you look at the individuals, over 50% of B2B researchers are millennials, right? And I think there's a stat by McKinsey that says in 10 years from now, over 70% will be, of decision makers will be millennials. That's a mind-blowing number, right? 64% of C-suites still make decisions, but they're influenced by 81% of the folks around them. 90% of research happens online. We know these numbers, right? And according to LinkedIn, 26% are looking for knowledge around your business model, thought leadership, again, education, and understanding your products and services. These are the important components to enabling this purchasing decision process. And at the company level, understanding not only that we have individuals buying from us, we have entire departments, right? And in technology, on average, there's 3.9. And most of them are either in IT, finance, engineering, and business development. Interesting. And if you break this down even further and you look at the funnel, and this is a great stat, of the top 3 pieces of content throughout the funnel, social is always a part of this decision-making process. And here's why. My supposition is this. In B2B, it's about risk, mitigating risk. And the best way to do this is through social proof persuasion. Someone in your role that has the same problem in a very similar company bought our product, loved it, and so will you. We're all human beings, right? That resonates. And then if you take one layer deep and you begin to extend the customer buying journey on the x-axis and you look at the customer's content and connection, from your customer's perspective, what are their needs, wants, and desires throughout this? And it changes because there's different people, right? What content do they need to feel educated to make this decision and move along the buyer's journey? And last but not least, where do they connect with us? How do we syndicate this in terms of where they are in the buyer's journey, right? And this is kind of a mental framework we think about when we plan along the customer buying journey itself. Fraud and deception. It's so much bigger than I think we realize right now. And sometimes we maybe want to turn a blind eye to it because it's a negative concept. But I'm going to bring it to the forefront because I think it's so important. And if you want to look at a fraudulent and deceptive quote, take a look at this. This guy thinks he's good looking. That is fraudulent and deceptive. Yeah, God. I won't even talk about the political side of it. Sheesh. Okay. But I believe we have this maniacal obsession with scale and velocity, right? We have so much pressure on us to deliver scale, and scale has created this fertile ground for fraud and deception, right? When I think our obsession should be with customer centricity and, in fact, doing less better. I heard that about 6 times today in one way, shape, or form. Focus on those customers, build a cornerstone asset, as Andrew would say, and then take that and make sure it resonates and then do a lot with that, right? That's our model. But let's talk about fraud for a second. $8.2 billion in a single year in ad tech fraud, right? Comes in the form of bots crawling the web, right? And surface as they look as though they're actually individuals. Human fraud, where we've got folks in Malaysia typing away and clicking on ads, right? Clickbait, where someone's actually filling out a form thinking they're going to win an iPad, but they really aren't going to buy, enterprise resource, services in the cloud. This has become so big, I believe Mark Warner and Chuck Schumer actually have asked the FTC to investigate just, I think, 48 hours ago. It's a big deal. We're wasting a shit ton of money on this. And deception. Agencies. I'm an agency. We're an agency. There is deception out there. We would never do this. But you look at the K2 report, right? Where agencies are aggregating multiple advertisers, dollars, right? And going to a publisher, right? And they're pocketing the difference, right? And they're not telling those advertisers. That is deceptive. Publisher arbitrage. We're going to someone like Time.com. Not saying Time does this, but in this example, you're spending $15 per CPM, and they don't have enough inventory to sell you. So they go to a third party, and they sell your ads on a third party. You have no idea. The third party only charges them $3. They pocket the difference. That's deceptive. And programmatic. Hot. Red hot. I get it. It has its place. It can actually do phenomenally well. But we have to be wary. We have to be very wary of this, in my opinion. Because we're talking about anonymous auctions, right? Buying cookie pools and audiences, right? And we don't know where these folks have been, what sites, what their intent is, how many times they've been bought and sold, right? And their take on this right now is they're basically saying, hey, we're like the New York Stock Exchange. It's not on us to validate the publisher is legitimate. We're just an exchange to buy and sell this. Be wary of that. And this has delivered a customer revolt, right? Banner blindness. We all know about this. Ad blocking. Right? We know that's happening all over the place. And now we can actually begin to block at the router and carrier level. This is going to cost everyone billions, and specifically publishers, in a big way. Get ready. And what can we do as the industry and advertisers? I think there's a lot of ad verification software that's happening, and for good reason, and a lot of these publishers are buying these companies, which is, I think, a good sign. But I think a lot of this, from a brand perspective, are in the control of the advertisers, us, right? Number one is demand viewability and insertion orders. It's pretty simple, but be willing to pay more. It's just what's going to need to happen. Number two is understanding the publisher supply chain, first party and third party. And number three is market to human beings. Think about that for a second. Push that scale thing outside of your purview for just a half a second. That's what I love about predictive, right? Because when we're talking about predictive, we're talking about people in market to buy. And they've done the hard work of bringing that to light. And I think that's why it's so valuable. And from a brand perspective, I think there's two things we can do. Number one is harness intent, right? And Google is the monster it is for absolutely very valid reasons. They're crushing it. And I think Google's in the room today. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Google. But I will say this. It's been an effective exchange for a very long period of time. And I think at some point, it's actually getting cost prohibitive to doing this, whether you look at it from a margin perspective or you stack it up against other channels. So be wary of that. We're all hooking the Google crack. But now I think where we need to bring to light how it's measured up against other channels. I think the under-tapped resource, and this is going to sound like a LinkedIn commercial, but we went to them for this because we've seen this in our success in terms of the companies that we've worked with, is harnessing interest. And I think it's undervalued right now. If we were buying and selling stocks, I would be buying LinkedIn stock right now. We buy on behalf of our customers. Because think about this from a first-party perspective. They know the companies we've worked for, right? They know the roles that we have. They know who we're following. They know what content we engage with. I mean, that's phenomenal, rich data that we should be using to drive success, right? And if you break it down even further, you can segment by audience, industry, job function, geolocation, campaign type. Then you can understand how big the addressable market is in terms of what you're going after, right? And then you throw in your budget. And then you understand, based on your budget and that addressable market, how much you can go out and capture. And we've used this exact mechanism to go back to the CFO and say, we want more addressable market. We know it's out there. We know it's going to cost. Just give us more money. We can reach it.